Hello everyone, I'm Sylvia from Fairlight Tarot. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to do a VR to Marlene Theresa, and it's called Tarot to the Extreme Part 1. I know that I'm joining the party like very late on this VR because I believe it was launched probably months ago. But I was watching a video with Anna from the Astro Lady Tarot, and she was saying, why not, if a VR is funny, if you like it, if you have maybe new decks, or maybe you already done a VR, but you have new decks and you think that they fit the descriptions better, why not? I mean, it's always fun to watch these kind of responses on video, isn't it? So let's have a look at my decks for this hashtag Tarot to the Extreme. The first category we're going to look at is Minimalist versus Maximalist. Let's have a look. So this is the Antique Anatomy Tarot by Claire Goodchild. This is the indie edition, but it's the second edition. And if you're familiar with Claire's Antique Anatomy, let's say, story, there's been a few editions before she got picked up by a mass market publisher. I was actually forever looking for the very first of the indie editions. I couldn't find it, and but I'm really happy that I found the second edition. This fits the category for minimalist for me, and you can see why. I mean, it's well, first of all, the color palette is, well, pretty much monochromatic. It's got a lot of shading though, which is really nice. But it's bones. It's, well, and some organs. It's very beautiful, by the way. I really like it. Some cards have a bit more information. They have the element, for example. They have some astral charts, which could be something to study. There is no, or at least I don't have, but I don't think there is a guidebook to this version, which is a pity because it would have been interesting to see. I'm a sucker for guidebooks, guys. I always like to check the author's interpretation of the cards. Why did they choose those cards, and what's behind certain symbology that you can find there. But in any case, so this is my minimalist deck, and is the Antique Anatomy Indie Edition, second edition by Claire Goodchild. And for the Maximalist category, I've chosen the Next World Tarot, written and illustrated by Christy C. Road. She is also an awesome singer, by the way. Check her out. Her Instagram account is really interesting. The reason why this deck is my pick for this category is because she definitely utilized as much as possible all the real estate in the card. Now there's two versions of this deck. One is a large version, which is basically this one, although it was even larger, and I trimmed off the white borders, well, because otherwise it wasn't very practical for my small hands. But there's also a pocket version. The pocket version that I used to have, although I wasn't happy with it because there's so many details that I actually want to look at them properly, and that's the reason why I got the larger version. Now, and I think you can see why there's this is my pick for this category, because there's so many symbols, there's so much in the cards to look at, and you know, you can definitely find the story. It's a storytelling deck, but it's your storytelling deck in the sense that it's up to you to accept the invitation of this deck to enter the card and describe what you see and get in the zone, let's say. It is absolutely beautiful. It's diverse. It is the kind of deck. This looks so much like her, by the way. it is the kind of deck that, you know, it is kind of provoking. It's obviously asking you to take a good look at yourself and take a good look at the world we're living in. It pulls the puncher that it needs to pull. Such beautiful color palette, by the way. I love the fact that there's vibrant colors in some cards, in other cards there's muted colors. And the artwork is just amazing. She also gets, she definitely gets the, let's say, the system, the RWS system. For example, this is the tower. And it's just magnificent, the way in which there's the representation of the destruction to come, but there's also a representation of a solid base. So yes, there's, you know, burning oil, but there's still nature. I really like this deck. It's I really enjoy using it. I enjoy looking at it. It is a deck that really gives you the possibility to talk, you know, to understand the card, to talk about the card. Gee, this Chariot. It's an inspiring deck, I would say. And it's full of details. So this is the Next World Tarot by Christy C. Core. The next category is very difficult because it's overrated versus underrated. And I just don't want, I do not, if I do think that a deck is overrated, I generally do not keep it for long. I don't like to keep what I would consider an overrated deck in my collection, simply because by me considering overrated, it means that we would not have a good bond, if it makes sense. And therefore, all of my decks are not necessarily underrated, but I appreciate them and I do assign the correct, or what I think and what I feel is the correct value to them. But if I had to pick one, it would be the Mystic Mondays Tarot, and definitely the Messages from the Light meditation deck is a much underrated deck. So let's have a look at the Mystic Mondays first. So this deck is by Grace Wong. The reason why I think it might be overrated is because ever since it got printed mass market, they probably sold millions of copies of this deck. Everyone has it, but I just feel, see, it's even in order. I look at the cards and then I put them back. Not necessarily though, sometimes I use a deck a lot and I just like to look at it and then I just put it back in order. So if a deck is back in order, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not using it. But if you look at the production, it's the kind of shiny glossy that I really don't particularly appreciate, because it's reflecting the light, it catches the light and everything. I like that it's got very vibrant colors. However, the association of colors is just not for me, and it's a very personal thing, which doesn't mean anything for anyone but myself. I also think that it tends to be a minimalist kind of deck, but for example, there's not enough symbology to convey the message of the card. You can talk about it, but some symbols seem to be there, others seem to be missing. I like the fact that this hermit is in front of what looks like a screen. One of those, you know what it reminds me of? One of those mirrors that they use in an interrogation room in a precinct, police precinct. Not that I've been there, but I watch movies like everyone else. And it looks like this person is in the interrogation room and there's this mirror there, but she knows that there's someone behind the mirror actually observing. So that there could be something there, but I feel like I'm also you know, just whipping it out for myself, not necessarily being communicated by the card. Although I do like this death card. I feel like it's overrated because of all the hypes that has surrounded this deck when it came out, and then, you know, I there was a period of time in which I saw everyone working with this deck, and then it went on for a while, and then it just subsided, and I don't know what happened. And I got it as well, and it's still here, so it means that I'm still using it. Not as much as, well, probably the least used of my decks, which means absolutely nothing. This does not speak about the artwork, it does not speak about the production in general, it does not speak about the author, it is just my personal opinion, and as such could be completely wrong. But if I had to pick, this is what I would pick for the most overrated tarot deck. And if we have a look at the opposite of that, the most underrated deck is an oracle deck. It is Messages from the Light, meditation deck by Joyce Huntington. This deck is absolutely brilliant. I believe it's underrated because, well, I don't see it anywhere. I don't know why. I just don't see it. I don't see it on Instagram, I don't see it on Facebook, I don't see it on YouTube. I don't know why they call it meditation deck, because of course you can use it as, you know, these the artwork and the keywords could be used as a prompt for meditation, but to me it's an oracle deck that I use in pairings. For example, I pair it up with, well, a few tarot deck that have this kind of border, like a sort of an antique kind of border. It expands on the message of the tarot. I love the artwork. I love the association with the keywords. Look at this patience card. I hesitated a lot to buy it because for some reason I thought it was a completely square deck, which is not. I have some problems in shuffling perfectly square decks like Dark Days, which is absolutely beautiful, but I can't shuffle it. Rather, I can shuffle it, but then the cards, for some reason, they just go all over the place, and I end up, because they're square, I can't tell which way is up, etc. And I do read the shadow meanings of the cards sometimes, but not in reversals, in the sense that only when I have a, for example, 1 card pull or a 3 cards pull, I read reversals. But when it's a complex kind of spread, I believe that the position of the cards, or even the cards around it, except the directionality of the cards, etc., expresses whether I should read the light meaning or the shadow meaning of the card. Therefore, I like to know of a deck which side is up, etc. To each their own. But this deck, I do believe that it's underrated. It's really, really beautiful. So this is the Messages from the Light meditation deck by Joyce Huntington, and this is my pick for the underrated deck. And the next category is worst shuffle versus best shuffle. So what have I got here? This deck is absolutely gorgeous. It is one of those darker kind of decks. By the way, it's called Diablo the Sanctuary, but it's a Titan Books production. Now, if you're familiar with the Stranger Things tarot deck, it's the same producer, or the same publisher. And I absolutely adore this deck for the cost, which is, I honestly don't recall, but it's like, I don't know, 20 bucks, 25, something like that. It is an absolutely gorgeous deck. These are the backs, as you can see, embossed backs. The cards themselves have red foil on them. The artwork is spectacular, deliciously dark, if you like this kind of very, you know, it reminds me of the Goetia by Fabulous Strani Tarot. But it's just absolutely magnificent. I really love it. And kudos to Titan Books, because finally, and let me show you. Let's see if we get there. Look at this star card. There you go. It's not a Pippish deck. I mean, how cool is that? It's a, well, you couldn't really tell from the Three of Swords, but look at the Four of Swords, Five of Swords. It actually is, look at the Six of Swords, how beautiful is this? It's amazing. I'm so happy that it's an illustrated miners deck. Gothic. I'm really, you know, giving thanks to Titan Books, because first with the Stranger Things tarot, and now with this tarot, they're actually doing a really good job in showing, you know, the various Disney movies based decks, that it can be done. Amazingly so, it can be done. You can actually illustrate the miners of a tarot deck, a fandom tarot deck. And they do a really good job in illustrating that. However, this deck is in this category, so the worst shuffle, because as you can see, it is massive. And I really like to use it in spreads, but it is massive. I mean, let me see if I've got a standard. Yeah, I've got a standard card here. Okay, it doesn't even fit in the frame. I mean, seriously, look at that, this much and this much. I cannot shuffle it. I don't know anyone whose hands are this big in order to be able to shuffle it. I cannot shuffle it overhand, not even this way. And let's not even talk about a full shuffle. The only way is wash shuffle. You know, when you do like this with the cards on the table face down, which is not my favorite way, because you end up with a lot of reversals. Unless it's my intention, as I said before, I don't necessarily read with them. So this is definitely the worst shuffle. And I think, you know, even if it were smaller, of a smaller size, the cardstock is a bit cardboardy. So I'm not sure about this. But it is an incredibly beautiful deck. Just unshuffleable. Is that a word? You cannot shuffle it. So this is the Diablo deck. It's called Diablo the Sanctuary. But let's have a look at my best shuffle when it comes to a deck, and it's the Wooden Wardens by Jessica O. Now this deck is a it's an oracle deck, as I said. It's got one of my favorite backs. I mean, look at this. It's just gorgeous. It's the right size. Also not too many cards. It's just the perfect amount. This one is very easy to overhand shuffle. As you can see, the cardstock is a bit on the thinner size, but it still holds up okay. It does a nice sound, and lo and behold, it's one of the few decks that I can actually refill and bridge shuffle, because it's not ginormous. Look at that. Amazing. And I just, since there's not that many decks that are small enough for my hands to do this with, I do it all the time. So this is definitely my best shuffle. just to show you the deck quickly. It's really beautiful. It's got an indication of the animal depicted in the card and the flower and a keyword. I've seen a lot of people trimming it because the white borders are quite large, but because when you trim it, even if you trim it professional, I have a professional trimmer, so I can do a really good job. I've been trimming decks for years. However, no matter how well you trim it, you always end up with it's not, you ruin the shuffle, you ruin it. It's not the same as before. And so since it's my best shuffle, I'm just gonna keep it this way because I don't want to ruin it. So this is the Weather Wardens Oracle by Jessica Rue, and it's my best shuffle. And the next category we're going to look at is my most confronting deck versus my most comforting deck. And I picked the Nicoletta Ceccoli Tarot versus the Ember Nora Tarot, Awakening Edition. But let's have a look at the Ceccoli. Now, I know that everyone pronounces it Ceccoli, but being Italian, I can assure you it's actually Ceccoli. She's from San Marino, by the way. San Marino has got a fantastic tradition of tarot. So Nicoletta, she is a magnificent artist. Her artwork is, as you can see, spectacular. However, it is to me quite confronting. Well, as you can see, many cards are difficult to look at. That's why for me is confronting. I use this deck in inner child work because it feels like it makes you communicate with your inner child as if the inner child were a different person from you, and that's the right thing to do, I believe. So the Six of Swords is a coffin, for example, and this rabbit is crying, and it looks like it's a dead child because of all the toys around and the fact that the rabbit is crying and she's got her eyes closed. To me, this card, okay, I know the RWS meaning of the Six of Swords, but in this particular card, to me, it signifies the passing of your inner child. So you see what I mean? This is disturbing. There's a few cards like that. This is also very disturbing. Not to talk about this one. So once we remove ourselves from the emotions that this deck can trigger in us, and the reason why obviously I picked it for this category is quite self-evident, I believe that the artwork is simply stunning. It's absolutely beautiful. So this is by far my most confronting deck, and it's the Nicoletta Ceccoli Tarot. And you know, on a lighter note, let's have a look at my most comforting deck, which is the Ember Nora Awakening Edition by Jamie Richardson. This deck is relaxing. It's making you breathe. It's making you look inwards and find a space of peace. It's a safe deck. I mean, any kind of card that may have a bit of a confrontational kind of depiction, like the Strength, for example, is showing you the opposite instead. It's as if it's telling you, even the Seven of Swords, for example. Yes, of course, I mean, she is barefoot, so she's probably gonna slice her feet by climbing on swords like that. But it's still, if you know what I mean, if you think about the general way in which that card is depicted, it's still a very gentle way to look at it. I thought about picking the Gentle Tarot for this category, but the Gentle Tarot will come up in a second for a different one, so I went with this one because they do have the same kind of role in my practice. And the fact that there's no blood, for example, in the Ten of Swords, and the fact that the expression on the character is not of pain, it's almost of surrender. I really like this deck for that reason. I got this deck during the pandemic, and it was really trouble to get it because it had to come from New Jersey to Australia. And during the pandemic, as you can imagine, I think Australia was completely cut off from the world. There were no shipments from the US to Australia, but I ordered it the week before. USPS just said, no, we're not going to Australia anymore. And I was lucky enough that because it was before the cutoff, they shipped it, but it took 3 months to arrive. Which is ironic because after 3 months they started again shipping, and then they stopped again, and then they started again, and then they stopped again. It was, let me tell you, it is painful to live in Australia when it comes to these kind of things. Some cards are rather pippish, but I don't mind, it's okay. It is such a comforting deck. Just by looking at it sometimes, I don't even need to read with it. I just look at the cards sometimes. This is the Amber and Aura Awakening Edition by Janie Richardson, and it's my pick for my most comforting deck. The next category is my daytime deck versus my nighttime deck, and I have got the Kitty Kahane for the daytime and the Tarot of the Sweet Twilight for the nighttime. Let's have a look at the Kitty Kahane. Now the Kitty Kahane is I just love how whimsical this deck is. To me, it's a deck to be used in the daytime, simply because, well, first of all, the colors are really bright. That's the combination of colors, the combination of the situations in the cards. For example, this star card, this character is balancing herself on a lotus flower, which might not be the easiest thing to do. But I just love also the personification of the body of astrology. The way it's done feels whimsical to me. It makes him smile. It's one of those decks that I like to have on my desk during the day. It's a bit for distraction as well. I really like it. It's oh, look at this coral. And I really love the backs, by the way. So this is the Kitty Kahane Tarot, and for my nighttime deck, we'll have a look at the Tarot of the Sweet Twilight by Cristina Benintende. That's another Italian. It has been, it's a mass market deck by Lo Scarabeo. I bought it in Italy, that's why the title is in Italian, but as you know, Lo Scarabeo always gives you, well, the older editions of the decks in several languages. I've seen a lot of people trimming it down. I like it this way. I don't know why. I generally don't like borders too much, but for this deck, I kind of like them. Now, the reason why it made it to my nighttime decks is because of the contrast in the colors. All the cards have very saturated colors, but the combination of the colors is very tasteful. So, for example, the Mystic Mondays also had very saturated colors, but I didn't like the association. And as I said before, this is completely personal. It is my jam, but it cannot be, but it might not be yours. It does call it, you know, it is, the title of the deck is the Sweet Twilight. So, and that's a perfect name for this deck for me. That's a Willy Wonka character for me. It does have that kind of dreamlike quality to it that, you know, it's the prelude, it's the twilight, so it's the prelude before nighttime. It's when you're supposed to access a kind of a different dimensions than the daylight. The daylight is provided by the sun, and it doesn't leave you any room for error, any room for different shades. Instead, the light that we see at twilight, I think it makes you enter the kind of realm in which you're not as safe as you think you are during the day. Imagery is so evocative, and it's done because there's a lot of shading as well, for example. So I love this deck. It's just really beautiful and evocative. Some of the cards are quite famous, I feel. Like I've seen this world card many times. Look at this card. It's the Nine of Cups, and the protagonist is standing on a rooftop, but at the same time it looks as if they're under the water, and on the surface there's a swan looking down, and it looks like they're reaching out for this swan. And that's a completely dreamlike interpretation of the Nine of Cups, because the Nine of Cups in this way gives me that kind of idea of a dream come true, a wish come true, but in a dreamlike fashion. Or even this Seven of Cups, for example, not knowing what to choose. You're stuck in your choice because you have this association between the skeleton you, so your inner call, and therefore your inner wishes, and your fleshed core. So whatever is around you does not reflect what you actually need. That's why you're kind of stuck, because you can't really choose something that you need. You can't really find it. So this, I can't just stop looking at these cards. They're just absolutely fantastic, magnificent, really beautiful. So this is the Tarot of the Sweet Twilight by Cristina Benintende, and this is my pick for a nighttime deck. The next category we're looking at is a tarot that I use every day and a tarot that I use every so often. And I chose the Soul by Julie Whiteledge and the Yokai Yochi by Boo Plague. Let's have a look at the Soul. Now this deck is literally on my desk. I love it so much. I do use it every day because I pull a 3 cards pull for myself. In the choice of representation of the cards, it's based on the RWS system. Even I noticed that the court cards remind me a lot of the archetypes that I myself recognize and identify as energies for these specific cards. And the Ace of Swords is my favorite Ace of Swords in all of my decks. And this to me is one of the reasons why I use this deck all the time, is because the Suit of Swords is definitely centered on the mind. Many of these cards have a very smart way to look at the meanings and to convey the message. Like, for example, one of my favorite devil cards is this one, where we're only as happy as how strong our Wi-Fi signal is. We are so dependent on our phones in this case, but Wi-Fi to me is everything related to internet, not just the phones, right? And it's just, we are puppets. It looks like someone is definitely having a lot of fun with our reception, you know, and we become absolutely nothing without it, which is a very interesting way to look at the devil. So every single card to me is a portal to our world the way I see it. It's I could live anywhere, so I would take this deck with me on a desert island, because it would definitely remind me of everything that I consider my life, the way that I live my life, the way that I enjoy you know, being a performer, looking at things that are happening in the world, expanding our horizon, or even, you know, giving attention to some things. Like the Six of Wands is the victory and the celebration of a victory, but it's a very it leaves you with a bitter taste in your mouth, because how many followers is enough followers to consider yourself a winner? You know, we live in a world in which we are kind of defined by how the others see ourselves, which is the wrong way to seek validation. And this deck is not afraid to pointing that out. And I love the fact that the characters are grayed out, because the author or the creator, Julie, says that she's done that deliberately because she wants this to represent a clean slate. So as if we were starting from scratch, from square one, and we have to build our own colors with experience. It's a deck that makes you work for it. It's the kind of work that makes you appreciate the intentions of the author behind the choice of these cards. And I'll always be grateful for that. This is the deck that I choose to represent the way I see the world. And never forget that a tarot deck is also a way to look at the world. So this is definitely a deck that I don't mind and actually want to use every day. But let's have a look at a deck that I love, I really love, but I use it every so often, because this is the Yokai Yochi by Google Plague. And well, first of all, it's a very expensive deck. It's a very rare deck, and apparently the creator has had a last run a couple of months ago, and the creator has expressed the desire not to reprint it. And I can imagine why, because you know, it must be so difficult. I mean, there must be so many things to finalize, to fine-tune, to take care of. So that's a reason why I'm not using it too often, but also because so this deck is based on Japanese lore, and each and every card has got a different yokai, and yokai is a spirit, but it's also a haunting spirit. Not just a ghost, it's a haunting kind of ghost. They are quite famous in the Japanese folklore. I have studied Japanese language and culture and literature, and part of the lessons that I was attending was focusing on yokai and yurei. And what I'm doing right now, and it's a very ambitious project, and I don't know why I started doing that, because every day I kick myself because it's not easy. But I'm going through each and every card of this deck, and I'm actually doing research behind the yokai, or you know, the spirit represented in the card. And I'm going to do a video in which I will go I will explain card by card what these spirits are, what they do, what the legend is. There is a guidebook, obviously, but it's not very, as you can see, it's very thin. And it does give you the name. For example, Karakasa Obake. It's a playful umbrella that likes to hop around on its one leg and lick people. Of course, as you do. But it would be very nice to have a couple of informations more about this. Why does the umbrella do that? So I thought that when I saw this, I recognized a few of the yokai that were in the deck, and I knew that there were more to the story. And so I thought, why don't I do it for the whole deck? But in any case, this is the Yokai Yochi by Boo Boo Plague, and it's my pick for a deck that I use every so often. And the last category for this VR is a deck that I use for light work, the Gentle Tarot by Mare in the Sky, and a deck that I use for shadow work, which is the Damian Tarot Borderless Edition by Patrick Valenza. I know that that's a rather obvious choice. Probably both of them are rather obvious choices. However, there is a reason why they're obvious choices. It means that these decks convey, for example, in the case of the Gentle Tarot, it conveys so much peace that you can use it for many other reasons, but the main one, at least for myself, is to do some light work. So this has got a bit of a characteristics that I explained for the Ember Noir as well. Some of the cards, even when they are, generally speaking, according to the symbolism of the RWS, they might be confronting cards. They still find a way to hug you. They just don't refrain to communicate the message. If the message is of sadness, of loss, like for example in this case the Five of Cups, you do have the typical symbology of the character looking away, so not even realizing that yes, 3 cups are lost, let's say, but there's still 2 that are upright and they're probably still filled. In what this deck does is by putting, for example, the Northern Lights here, it gives you the idea that there is a beyond, there is an after, there is a it's like a calling for looking for something after that. Don't get yourself stuck into the mourning for this loss, but look at the fact that there is still something standing, which is a symbology or an interpretation that you can find in many other decks. I just feel that this deck has a way to do that in a very gentle way, and that's why it's called the Gentle Tarot. This is, for example, the Ten of Thunder. Thunder is the suit of swords, so the suit of the mind. And we don't see the usual representation of the character laying down, being, hit by 10 swords, which is a bit of an overkill for me. There is that kind of the sense of finality of that is represented in this card anyway. There is that kind of loss of hitting rock bottom, but the figure is not lying down. She's actually almost leaping from a space of rainbow, a space of light, a space of color. And I really like the fact that there is a recall, there's a resonance between the color of the rainbow where she's leaping from, and she's looking up at the number 10, which is also in a rainbow color. There's always a way to refer to something, not necessarily positive. This is not a deck that hides the truth. Rather, it's a deck that has found a way to tell you the truth in such a way that it does not hurt you. And that's the reason why I use it for light work. So this is the Gentle Tarot by Mare in the Sky, and that is my pick for a deck that I use for light work. And the last deck is the Damian Tarot by Patrick Valenza, and I use this deck, like many of us, for shadow work. It is the kind of deck that definitely it fits this category in a great way. Of course, so many of the cards, I would say practically each and every card is so confronting that no matter what your pull is, no matter what your pick is, you will still find something that calls upon your shadow. I know that the meanings of these cards, for example, if I can find the Death card, I will explain why. There's a lot of hope behind some of these cards as well. You wouldn't say that at first look. I personally wouldn't be able to tell, but there is, oh my goodness, look at this Hermit. So it's a kind of a the stuff of nightmare, isn't it? And it makes sense because if you know the story behind the creation of this deck, the author Patrick Valenza imagined this place, which is the Fernwood Asylum, and it imagines the way in which patients of this asylum would draw the cards. So this is the Death card that I wanted to talk to you about. I recently, no, actually about 6 months ago, recently compared to how long I've had this deck, I got the large book. It's a coffee table book, and it explains the creative process that goes behind, you know, producing these cards, and it's incredibly interesting. It's fascinating. And it also goes into detail for each and every card, and it explains the reason why certain choices were made. In this particular case, it looks like specifically the mother is rejecting the son by, you know, stepping on them. However, and the real meaning of this card is that there has to be a transformation. You have to go through this passage. So as much as the child would like to go back to the womb because the womb is a safe space, the mother is telling, no, you have to stay where you are. You have to go through all the pain and the joys of life because that's what you're meant to be doing. So it does have some kind of balance. If you look at the intention of the creator behind the depiction in these cards, there is a balance. However, the reason why I picked it for this category, so the deck that I use for shadow work, is because at first it looks like it's the card of rejection, and that could be said for many other cards. It is, though, I really admire this deck. I admire the way the author has the courage that he had to come up with these images. I mean, if you think about it, for me, it's a shadow work that requires a lot of guts. I mean, you do need to be aware of stuff that can come up to the surface. So what's in shadow needs to be brought to the light, whether it's something that needs to be dealt with or released, or whether it's something that needs to be nurtured. But generally speaking, it's something that is in the shadow because we want to keep it there, and it's probably because we are scared of facing it. So for this deck to be represented the way it is, I think that the author must have done a lot of shadow work themselves. I've listened to a couple of interviews, especially this one where Simon from the Hermit's Cave has interviewed Patrick Valenza whilst he was visiting a cemetery. And I've heard a couple of, comments about this deck. And that's what gave me the inspiration to buy the larger book, because I have heard about this sense of balance that you can find in the cards, even though it wouldn't look like it. But in any case, it's an absolutely gorgeous deck. This is the Damian Moon Tarot Borderless edition by Patrick Valenza. It has been printed by US Games, And this was my pick for the deck that I use for shadow work. Now, thank you for being with me until the end of this video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing to my channel. More to come. Have a great day.